G'day and welcome to the Grow a Small Business Podcast. I'm your host, Troy Truen. Each week, we speak with an owner who has grown a business with 5 to 30 team members to something bigger. Diving into their numbers and unearthing the pain they've experienced, we explore what they did to overcome each barrier and what they would do differently from day one. Let's get into it. We'll have all the show notes and any resources mentioned in the cast on our website. Starting out with his brother and a good friend in 2015, 5 years later, they now have 5 million customers and 42 team members, with about a third of them in the head office in Hobart, Tasmania. The rest splayed across Melbourne, USA, Canada, Poland, England and Scotland. Biteable is a website that helps businesses create videos and animations for their own site and presentations. They've doubled the business year on year since starting. In 2016 raised 1.1 million, then 2.3 million in 2018 to total 3.4 million investment so far, all in Australia, but have started talking with investors in the US. Biteable was one of the first ideas they had, but it took a year of testing others and arguing before coming back and getting serious. James believes the hardest thing in small business is navigating the uncertainty, which you need to get comfortable with. Advice he would give himself when starting out on day one is all you are doing is solving a customer's problems, so the only thing that matters is the customer. Welcome everyone. Today I am interviewing James MacGregor from Biteable. Thanks for your time, James.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
Let's start with how we know each other.
We've known each other for a while. We were just talking about it just before this call. I think we met in about 2000. You had a party that a friend of mine invited me to when I was living in Melbourne.
I think it was late 90s actually.
Maybe late 90s, I don't know. It's a blur.
Yeah,
we had a mutual friend and used to sort of catch up through him, and then we were both living in London, started catching up then, and then obviously you've been in Hobart where I am for the last little while.
Yeah, we both moved back to Hobart at the same time, not really realising either had, and I think I just literally bumped into you at the pub.
I was literally sitting at the pub. I was like, Troy, what the hell are you doing here?
Yeah,
Last time I saw you was in London.
Tell our audience a bit about Biteable, your business.
Biteable is a software product for making videos. Everything's done in a browser. It's all done online. It's kind of like making a PowerPoint, but it spits out a video. And primarily businesses use it for making ads, explainer videos, promotions, things to put out with their job ads. Also, hundreds and hundreds of different use cases, but it's generally they're trying to explain something in video in a really short format.
Where's the business based? This one's an interesting question for you, I think.
So we started in Hobart. I'm sitting here in the Biteable Hobart office. We have 17 team members here, mainly engineers. We've gone really remote first. So we opened a second office in Melbourne, which is where all our motion designers live. And a lot of our team is dispersed all over the planet now. So we have people in the US, Canada, Poland, England, Scotland, kind of everywhere. Over the last 2 years, really taken on the remote first ethos, and so everyone works online and kind of round the clock.
Wow, that must be a really challenging or different way to manage a team. More than half.
More than half not here.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
There's 42 staff now, so it's definitely we've had some learning curves, but I think we've found our groove. Yep. It's a different style of running a business.
And does that mean you have to do a lot of travel then?
I don't do a crazy amount. I go to the US kind of every 6 months. I'm in Sydney or Melbourne. Sydney's where most of our board is, and Melbourne we've obviously got an office. I'm probably there every twice a month. I'm probably travelling, but I only go for a day or two. So in previous incarnations I've travelled and worked permanently. So travelling, every 2 weeks for a day or two feels like nothing. Yeah.
When you were in London, you were working for BigCommerce, weren't you?
Yeah, so I worked for BigCommerce and pretty much just travelled around the clock. When I actually moved to Hobart, I took a full-time job with a startup incubator called Pollenizer in Sydney, and I had to be in Sydney every second week. And so, I did this for years, and I just got really used to being on the road.
Yeah. That would have been hard, though, for you and Carol, and particularly when the boys came along as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so the difference is now we've got 2 kids, both very young. They like to spend a lot of time with Dad, so I try and limit my travel.
Yeah.
But when you do short trips, it's also good because you get a bit of a break from being full-time in the office and a full-time dad.
Yes, because they're early risers, aren't they?
Mm-hmm.
And Biteable, it makes money. It's a subscription model now. Mm-hmm. What does it charge currently?
So most people pay $29 a month. You can make unlimited videos for that. There's a free account, so people can make videos with the free account. You just get more content and more features on the paid plan. It's all self-service. It's all just done completely online. You just need a credit card to take a premium account.
Let's talk about growth. Some key numbers you can share to outline to the audience the growth the business has gone through.
We've pretty much doubled the business year on year every year since we've started. We've now got 5 million users on the platform. There's 42 staff that kind of bring that to life.
So in 2015, it started out with yourself, one of your good mates, Tommy, and Simon, one of your brothers. Just the three of you in 2015. I think that was above our local cafe because we lived just around the corner from each other.
Yeah, so I actually rented I quit the startup incubator that I was at. I was doing a bunch of freelancing. I'd been living in London before that, and so I was still pretty new back to Hobart. My brother moved back at the same time. We rented an office above a cafe just because I was drinking lots of coffee there, and they said, we've got an office upstairs you could use.
Yep, that's our local.
Yeah, and then we spent a year in there, Simon and I, and we tested a startup idea every month for a year, and Biteable was what we decided to commit to after that time. It was actually one of the first ideas, but it was the most complicated to work out how to execute it. And once we basically had the blueprint down, we brought on a third co-founder, Tommy, to help us build the first version. Probably for the first year and a half, there was just the three of us.
Right.
And then we got to about 10,000 users on there. We were probably making like 5K a month then.
Yeah.
So just like paying the server costs. We pitched for probably 6 months around Australia to VCs and went in startup comps and all that sort of stuff. We ended up raising 1.1 million back then.
Yep.
Spent all of that on hiring a team. Pretty much just hired engineers and motion designers initially. That kind of got us through to beginning of last year. Beginning of the year before, we raised another round of investment.
Start of 2018?
Yep. So we raised 2.3 million. We brought another VC on the board then. And it was really at that stage that we realized we've just been building tech and content, so like video tech and content that you can use in videos, but we didn't have anyone else in the business other than that. So there wasn't really anyone running the business side of it. We didn't have anyone in finance. We started to look at what are the pillars that we're missing, and they were support, operations. We didn't have a product team at all, and we've really spent our time since then building out those pillars to keep building the business.
And going back to a point you just made a minute ago, in Tim Palmier's interview, he mentioned that you gave him that advice, which you gave me when I mentioned it, about test, kill what's not working, and then double down on what is. And it's interesting that you've just said that Biteable was one of the first ideas, but you went and tested a heap of other ideas. You just didn't jump straight into it. So I think that's really wise. Yeah,
I'm a big believer in testing. Anyone who's worked with me knows that. There's two sides of it. So we test a lot of things all the time. You try and test things that are worth testing, not just anything. So you try and do high impact tests. But then there's also a slow hunch. So you test something, it's like, it didn't quite work, but I still feel like it wasn't, we didn't quite have the pieces. So there's a combination of quickly testing and learning, but also beavering away on something in the background, which was what we did for the year during those tests. We're like, we still kept arguing. We didn't really let it go. And it took us the whole year to really work out how to do it.
And how did the actual Biteable idea come about? Do you remember that?
The idea for the business, I actually learnt this one at the at Pollenizer, the startup incubator. What I found was they would partner with founders, really smart founders, usually with some domain expertise. They'd then put a whole team behind them. Investors would often get interested and some investment would appear. And then they'd dump it with me. I was the head of marketing, so I ran the marketing, and they'd say, all right, we're going to do something consumer in this industry with this kind of payment model, or, three combinations of what made us start. It's going to be subscription, it's going to be consumer, and it's going to be pet food, for example, which is what I actually did. And what I found was there wasn't really anything in the initial idea. It was just a starting point. And all of the interesting stuff came when you just really dug into that in that direction, and you found a whole bunch of stuff. And you're like, wow, if I'd never just gone full on into that space, I wouldn't have ever found what we found.
Yeah.
And so before Biteable, we picked video, which we've both been really passionate about.
You and Simon, your brother.
Simon and I.
He was in that space already with...
He's a motion designer, so he'd been working in film. I originally was a product manager from a Flash animation tool and a bunch of other kind of design tools. So we had a keen interest, and we just had a thesis that everything was going to become video. And so why don't we just focus on video and we'll find something?
Yeah.
And that was really useful because it takes the pressure out of, is this a good idea? Because most of the time it's not. But if it's a good space, it doesn't really matter where you start.
Yes.
And so that was kind of the core of it. It sounds weird, but it wasn't really like we're going to make this WYSIWYG video builder and people are going to make ads and it was just like, there's something in video, we don't know what it is.
Yep.
And then as we got further into it, we kind of worked out, I think there's a gap here.
Yep. Well, I think it was fortuitous then having a brother, because he used to work for Peter Jackson, Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, so he worked at Weta
Wellington
on feature films in New Zealand. So we really, I'd focused on product and marketing for startups, and Simon had focused on animation and motion design. And so we really just looked like, how can we combine these skills? What with the skills we have, there's just two of us in this small office initially, and then Tommy. Like, what can we actually do, the three of us?
It looked like a perfect team on paper, you and Simon, and then add in Tommy, who's a uber nerd. He's really good at what he does. Yeah.
It's like, particularly in the early days, you just need a team that can just get stuff done.
Yeah.
I did find, again, at the incubator, having an engineer, a designer, and someone focused on business/marketing was a really good combination.
Yep.
Because you could pretty much get anything out the door.
I think getting those founding org chart right, the roles, what the roles the business needs, and then obviously getting the right people in those roles or on the bus, as Jim Collins speaks about. How's it go working, especially in a fast-growing business, with your brother? We can edit this bit out, or the episode we send to Simon anyway. But how's it going working with...
I think my big learning with, working with a brother and a close friend is, as the business grows, our roles change a lot.
Yep.
And so initially we didn't have anyone running the business. Everything was just split between the three of us. And then I stepped up as CEO, which was more of a requirement once we were raising investment and we landed investment. And then as we start to bring in originally lots of team members and then heads of department, you actually need some org structure. And so there was a point where, I had to get Tommy and Simon to start reporting to me, and I actually had to start working as the CEO. So that, changed the dynamic between us.
I think we had a chat at one point over a beer or at some point where it sounded to me like there was no head cheese. No one was really running the show. The three founders were all at the top of the org chart. Yeah. I don't think you even had an org chart at the time. And to me, and I, as you know, I can be pretty direct and blunt. I said, what the fuck's going on with that? Someone has
Sounds familiar.
That sounds like me. Someone has got to be responsible day to day and report to the board. I don't care if it's a good mate or your brother. They've got to know who they report into. Yeah,
so that's the big change. The big learning for us is everyone, whether you're a founder or not, whatever your relationship is, the business doesn't give a shit.
Yep.
End of the day.
Yep.
And everyone needs a role.
Yep.
And you need who reports to who's accountable for what, who makes sure gets stuff done. And originally we just all chipped in, and so we would just get consensus.
Yes.
But that doesn't work as you scale. No, you actually need who's accountable for what.
Yep.
And so that for us now, we each have a team of people under us, so they need to be really clear on what that team's meant to do, what their OKRs are, all of that more formal management stuff. Yeah. So it has changed a lot. It's changed from the three of us arguing mostly to try and get to a consensus.
Yep.
We did that as a process. So originally, even when we had a bigger team, the three of us would lock ourselves in a room once a month, and for 2 days we would just argue about what we were going to build for the next month.
Yep.
And so you do one day, everyone would walk out, you come back the next day and go, I've got to clear ahead, I think we should do this.
Yep.
That actually worked really well because we had competing kind of concerns in the business, and generally we picked out something that was high impact. And we, me from a marketing, Simon from a video and motion design side, and Tommy from engineering, and we just got stuff done every month.
Yep.
Doesn't work with a bigger team.
No, it doesn't. I think, and we talk about this in the Kick-Ass Manager course, the need for clear job descriptions in roles so people know what excellence looks like in their role, in their corner of the business as well. So yeah, I do think that that clarity, making sure as you're growing up, as the business is growing up, having professional outlines of who owns what, who reports to whom. Absolutely.
Yeah, it just as the business matures, then everyone's role needs to mature.
Yeah. Let's talk about funding, how you funded the business. So you haven't taken any bank debt on. It's been cash flow plus the venture capital. Was 3.3 million you've raised now? 3.4?
Like 3.5.
3.5. Yep.
Yeah.
Maybe talk a bit about that journey. I know you've said before that raising in Australia has been really hard. That's why you've had to go to the US. But I think all the funds so far are Australia.
Yeah. So we've only raised out of Australia to date. It's been really interesting. Like, we purposely sat down and decided this is a big idea. We want to raise capital for it. We want to do it properly and build a serious team. Luckily, I'd had the opportunity to work on some great startups like BigCommerce and Moo.com. And I'm like, okay, that's what I want to build, and it's going to take capital. We then went out and pitched, and then usually we would pitch and it would be a flop, and we would go back for 6 months to 12 months and go, everyone's really focused on this bit of the business which has got lots of red flags, and then we would fix it and we'd come back and they go, which is a bit slower than this, and they'll go, yeah, okay, now we'll fund it. We've learned a lot from that, how to approach investment, when it's a right fit and when it's not, how to find funding sources. I've also spent a lot of time, particularly in the last year in the US, talking to some of the bigger VCs over there. What advice would I give to people with funding? Probably a useful framework for me. I've worked with a mentor who had a lot more experience in raising investment, and his advice was there's no right or wrong path. Either raising investment or bootstrapping, particularly in startup world, people are very opinionated about one of them.
Yep.
Neither of them is right or wrong, but they'll produce a different type of business.
Yep.
So if you want to build a business that's a smaller business, maybe can be more of a lifestyle, can give you dividends, you can work on it for a long time, but it might get to like tens of millions of dollars in revenue, then you should probably bootstrap, because tens of millions of dollars in revenue is generally not a great outcome for a VC.
Right.
If you want to build $1 billion business, and if you think this idea could generate hundreds of millions in revenue at least, then you should go for it and raise investment. It's really like, how big do you really believe it can get to?
Yep.
And choose your funding based on that, because otherwise you're going to get a lot of pressure to execute something that the idea just might not be able to sustain, and you might not be able to sustain. It might not be the business that you really want to run.
Your funding journey to date, I guess a good question to ask there is, what would you do differently?
That is a tough one. I don't know. We've spent a lot of time on it. It's always easier in hindsight that you would just cut a lot of corners.
Yeah.
I would cut a lot of corners in future. I think one thing I would do differently, like a lot of advice in the startup space generally, I don't know if it's the same in the US, but in Australia, like there's a lot of talk about founders, vision, and all this really touchy and feely stuff, which is great, and pretty much all startups that I meet get kind of wrapped up in that stuff. But at the end of the day, particularly when you start to raise bigger rounds, it really just comes down to the model. When VCs, venture capitalists are looking for it, they're just looking for where are the risks.
Yep.
And so every time you raise investment, people are like, yeah, look at the model, how big is it going to get, how long is it going to take, and what are the risks that you're not going to get there.
Yeah.
And you spend a lot of your time taking the risks out. So it's like, well, we can 10 times this with more certainty, more clarity, and we've taken out the risks of go-to-market or customers leaving for another product or new competitors turning up. And so probably spending the summary, I'd probably spend more time obsessing about the model and the strategy, and less time focused on competitors, what's happening into the market, the kind of fluffier stuff in my books that you have less control over.
And it sounds like you've had a good board, very supportive, obviously very switched on, and also the mentor that you spoke of before. That was specifically a mentor in the domain or the space of raising money?
So no, I brought on Mitch, who I used to work with or worked for. He was one of the founders of BigCommerce.
Right.
So he was my first mentor that I'd ever worked with, and I worked with him for about 2 years.
Yep.
I used him for like personal stuff, for business stuff,
Yep.
for product stuff, fundraising. He'd kind of just been across the gamut, and because we had a good relationship, it was really, really useful. Probably the biggest outcome from that was just changing my perspective and becoming more self-aware that there were things that I could change and do to have more impact in the business. And that I see that as a very common journey, where people get to a point where they realise, I fundamentally need to change how I view this. Either you're getting, there's so many ways, generally you're blocking yourself, and so either you're worrying about things that you shouldn't be worrying about, you're not hiring quick enough, you're not dealing with issues in the business that are really obvious to an outsider, you're trying to raise too much money, you're not trying to raise enough, it's just kind of never ending, and it's completely different to the individual, depends on what they fall back on, but just learning to fall back on less things and make decisions that you've just never had to make before. A mentor that's seen
a lot of it,
the playbook for what you're trying to achieve, is really useful.
Absolutely, yeah. What's one of the most stressful points in your small business growth journey?
Anytime you don't have direct control over something that affects the business is really stressful. And so for us, that's always fundraising, because you have no real control. You're basically doing this big long sales process, and it will either come off or it won't. But it's out of your hands. You can do a lot of work on it, but someone else is going to make that decision. Things to do, like we had to do some like technology, legal licensing stuff. Again, that was really stressful because we didn't have any control over it. I think in summary, it's things that could dramatically affect the business that you have little control over have always been the most stressful. Things where something just isn't working, but we're like, it's not working now, but we're confident we'll get there. That's when we're like, well, we'll just roll our sleeves up for 6 months and get done.
Into it.
We usually don't stress about those things. It's just like it's going to take a while.
What areas in business do you feel you've had to work on the most to add the greatest value?
Probably just leadership and people stuff. So I was always a specialist on teams. I'm pretty much, I'm quite analytical. I started as an engineer. Studied maths at university, and so I like problem solving and just like getting in and being the person that does stuff. And I was always worked really hard. That doesn't, that's only so useful for a team. Often you've got to get in and go, there's some conflict here, I really need to resolve it. Or the team's really struggling and they don't realise we actually need to hire someone else to come in and help us. I think it's really all that people stuff has been the hardest thing for me to learn, but it's also had the most impact.
Especially with such phenomenal growth. Absolutely,
like a lot of the time, if we've gotten stuck on something, rather than just bashing our head against the wall for another 6 months, we just find someone who's really good at it and we get unstuck. And we've kind of just been doing that over and over again. And
what's been the biggest mindset shift for you in your small business growth journey?
Probably related to that. You don't have to have all the answers. You just need to be able to get the answers. Particularly in the early days in startup space, people want you to be the experts. All the advice you'll get is like, you really need to solve this. It's all quite critical, whether it's your board or new investors you're talking to or other people in the industry. There's a lot of pressure to be like, you guys really need to solve it. And you don't realise, well, I don't need to solve it. I just need to find someone who can solve it. Like you don't have to be the smartest person in the room. You need to be able to keep the business moving forward.
Find it hard to define a clear strategy, then communicate it and execute it alongside the rest of your team? Or you currently don't work a simple quarterly strategic plan to boost your team's performance? Our Business Growth Formula online course is perfect for small business owners with 5 to 30 team members wanting to grow. We share the mindsets, habits and tools to be a legendary leader in your business. growsmallbusiness.com.
What's the number one habit you think a small business owner needs to develop and maintain?
The thing that I've found really useful in the last 12 months is candid feedback, which
like
is
receiving
a habit.
it or giving it? Or both?
Both.
Yeah.
Both. I think I'd already probably worked a year before that on kind of just general awareness and going, what is the real problem here? Am I not hearing it? I'm not hearing the answer that I'm looking for. But beyond that, it was more giving feedback and just being really direct, because there are constant issues in any business and things fester. And what I've learned is if you just get a clear view of like, what's the problem here, give people really direct feedback early and often, it works.
Yeah, I love that. And I talk about it in the Kick-Ass Manager course, the feedback model that Mark at Manager Tools put out some years ago. I'm a big fan of that. Really simple 3 or 4 step feedback, depending on if it's positive or adjusting feedback. But I totally agree with that. If you don't tell people they need to change something or keep doing something great, then things fester. And as Mark talks about, you instead of just correcting the steering wheel when you're driving down the road, you have to jerk the wheel so you don't end up in the ditch.
Yeah, pretty much. And people don't want to give the feedback because they're worried about the person that's going to receive it.
But most of the time, people actually want to hear it.
Yeah, and they're really receptive.
Yeah.
But you've got to have when you give feedback, you've got to really understand the issue. You've got to put it into good language.
Yes.
You've got to approach it the right way. Like if you can come in and say, you're doing this and it's crapping me off and everyone's pissed off, it's probably not going to work. But if you come in and say, there's
when
this problem
and
it seems to be reappearing, let's talk about how to fix it. Here's how I think it should be solved. What do you think?
What can we change so it doesn't happen in the future?
Yeah.
And how about professional development? Do you invest much time in professional development?
Only a little bit. I joined a CEO club, like a training club, at the beginning of last year called the Summit Club. So it's all tech founders, and we meet up every second month and we do calls every month. And that's been really useful because it's kind of like AA for tech founders.
Alcoholics Anonymous, right? Yeah.
You break into little groups and you're really encouraged to kind of tell what's happening, what's good and what's challenging in business, personal life, relationships. And it's been a really effective format, both because I can really get to the nuts and bolts of things that are driving me crazy, which I didn't even realize, but also because I hear everyone else's, you realize
you're not alone.
Everyone's got the same challenges, and it's easier to reflect on yourself and what you need to improve when you hear it from peers.
Yes.
When you hear it from someone else, like, you should be doing this better, but they're not in your situation, it's just not really relatable.
Yes.
So yeah, I guess it's just having a peer network has been really useful.
We've already touched on coaches and mentors. Anything else there you want to talk about?
Not really. Like I get a lot of informal mentoring. I've had one formal mentor. I think it's really, really valuable if you can find the right person. I definitely encourage people to pursue that.
And James, what do you think is the hardest thing in growing a small business?
Navigating the uncertainty. So, people often stay in a full-time role or even a business that maybe is unfulfilling because there's a lot of fear around what if this doesn't work out.
Yeah.
And so the more that I do it and the further I get along, the more I realize it's just being comfortable with a certain amount of uncertainty that's like, this could really work out, it might not.
Yep.
That's a constant challenge.
Yeah.
And the two sides of that is just giving yourself the freedom to really plow into it and give it a crack, and having the ability to stop when it's not working.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people, especially in the startup space, might flog something for, years longer than they should, and they could have gone on to a new opportunity and been more successful.
I've certainly done that. Absolutely, yeah.
I think everyone has. I have in previous incarnations, and I'm determined not to, in Biteable or any future ventures.
Yeah. And favourite business book which has helped you the most?
I really love a book called Built to Love. It's a product manager's book I read a long time ago.
It's a play on Jim Collins' Built to Last book. Yeah.
I actually haven't heard that one, but and it's just about building. It's it's product centric, but it's the same for businesses. I use a lot for the kind of approach for the brand generally, but it's just like, how do you build something that customers actually genuinely love? It doesn't just happen by chance. All of the brands that you love out there, common ones are Airbnb and Apple. They haven't just happened to become really lovely brands. They really work on it.
Worked hard, yeah. Any great podcasts or online learning tools you use for your own professional development?
At the moment I'm listening to YC Combinator out of the US. They have interviews with startups that they fund, and they're usually like hour-long interviews. I find them really useful. That's probably my most trusted resource at the moment. I listen to one of those most days.
Great. One tool you would recommend to help grow a small business?
Definitely Google AdWords.
Yep.
I've got a background in SEO. I often ran the marketing for startups and software companies. I just got reminded today that when we launched Biteable by my co-founder, that the first thing we did was I set up some ads, went to bed, and the next morning we had 200 signups.
Wow.
And then I was like, we were always like, oh, this video thing is interesting, it might not work, and then we woke up and we're like, it's going to work. So you can just you can learn a lot from real people that you don't know, and it's very impersonal. And so Google Ads just allows you to run ads in Google search. And there's a lot you can learn from Google search. I could do a whole episode on that.
You would love it, being a bit of a math nerd as well, and very analytical, that you can track everything. Marketing now is great that way.
You can track everything. You can, a lot of Biteable, once we picked what we were going to do, a lot of what we did was built off search demand. So it's just like, what are people looking for? And then you can run some ads. Will they do this? No, they won't do that. What do they do? And you can just tweak it every day.
And a lot of A/B testing, so you can really refine down to what's working.
Yeah, so you can test different messaging. You can see what people actually type. So it's like, I thought you were looking for an ad maker, but you're actually looking for a video maker, and change your own language. It's endless. You could spend the rest of your life in there.
It does sound a bit creepy though. Let's move on to the last and my favourite question. What would you tell yourself on day one of starting a small business?
I think my number one would be, all you're doing is solving customer problems. So the only thing that really matters is the customer. And everyone says this stuff, it always sounds fluffy and BS. I think it's kind of related to the funding advice from earlier. In tech space, there's always a lot of hype. This market could be really big, and you could partner with, Google and all these great companies. Do the end customers need it? Do they want it? Are you really solving their problems? And I see a lot of times where small business owners or tech founders, they're kind of sabotaging their own potential because they really want to prove that their idea is great, or they really are attached to like, I really want to build this. I hear the language. You hear like, I want this. This is what I want. Who gives
Who gives a fuck?
Basically, if the customers don't want it, it's not going to work.
That's right.
And if you spend your time talking about what you want, you're pretty much going to go under. So just don't do it. It's a really hard thing though. I run the product team at Biteable as well, and we spend a lot of times going, wouldn't it be great if you could do this?
Yeah.
And now we spend a lot of effort going, but do customers want to do that? Does it really help them, or does it not?
So you circle back to that question all the time. That's great. And I think going back to coaches and mentors and having a great board, that can really protect you from holding on to stupid ideas too long, or
Yeah, the thing is, when you get a lot more people involved in the business, whether they're staff or board members or mentors or anyone, they're going to throw in their 2 cents.
Yeah.
It's natural. There's a void, and they want to fill that void.
Yeah.
But most of the time, they have no idea.
Yeah.
Because they're not the customer.
Yes.
And it's not because they're not smart and they're not super experienced. They're not the customer.
Yes.
And that is the hardest one. Like, if you raise investment, you will get very, very strong opinions from all your investors. They're all wrong. They might have tactics and techniques that you should listen to.
And that's what's great about online marketing. It's empirical. You can test and watch and see what customers are responding to.
Yeah. And the more experienced business people will understand that it's like, you're not getting the customer insights. That's why that's not working. What are the customers saying? Show me the customer data. Yeah. And as soon as the company focus becomes obsessed on how the customers are going in the business, the more likely you are to succeed.
Thank you very much, James. It's been very valuable for our audience, and congratulations on the growth so far and success to yourself, Simon and Tommy, and the wider team. And thank you very much for your time.
No problem. Thanks for having me. It was fun.
We'll have all the show notes and there are any resources mentioned in the cast on our website. Starting out with his brother and a good friend in 2015, 5 years later, they now have 5 million customers and 42 team members, with about a third of them in the head office in Hobart, Tasmania, the rest splayed across Melbourne, USA, Canada, Poland, England and Scotland. Biteable is a website that helps businesses create videos and animations for their own site and presentations. They've doubled the business year on year since starting. In 2016 raised 1.1 million, then 2.3 million in 2018 to total 3.4 million investment so far, all in Australia, but have started talking with investors in the US. Biteable was one of the first ideas they had, but it took a year of testing others and arguing before coming back and getting serious. James believes the hardest thing in small business is navigating the uncertainty, which you need to get comfortable with. Advice he would give himself when starting out on day one is all you are doing is solving a customer's problems, so the only thing that matters is the customer.